We're going to start a new segment on our podcast, and we're going to call it Time to Stump Stu.
Oh, no.
Yes, this will be a fun part. So we're getting a lot of interaction on social media, on our Facebook page, and whatever else. And so our team has sent to me several questions or comments. So I thought it'd be fun for each episode to do one or two of those and just get a quick reply. Not that we need to get defensive, because sometimes that online courage is quite strong for a lot of people.
Right.
The cyber courage. But overall, there's some legitimate feedback, questions, comments. So I think it'd be good for us just to interact with some folks that take the time to listen to our podcast, and we thank you for that. But we want to kind of wrestle a little bit with some of the things you have. So I'm throwing these at Stu. He hasn't had time to look at them and really articulate an answer. So that's why we call it Time to Stump Stu.
Just ask any question about technology or music.
Okay. So yes, if you really want to stump him, give a nice tech question. But these aren't, thankfully, we're not starting with tech questions. First one, though, is from our podcast on aliens and ghosts and do they exist. Richard said, aliens, yes. Meaning, yes, he believes they exist because the pyramids are proof of it. A bunch of camel jockeys didn't quarry 60-ton blocks of stone that were perfectly cut and stack it 300 feet high. We can't do it today with hydraulics and helicopters. What do you say to Richard about that?
Richard's got a few things he's got to clean up a little there. It's 450 feet high. It's not 300 feet high. They weren't camel jockeys. The ancient Egyptians were actually different than the people who live in Egypt now, who are Arab peoples.
When did that switch?
I
mean, it was a long
Yeah. Do you
fade,
remember we haven't talked about too much yet in terms of ancient Egypt and the Israelites stay there when they were in slavery. But almost every country that seems to attack Israel or do bad things to Israel seems to not be around for long or come out as something else. There aren't too many Amalekites left, which is why I said if we ever started a private school, we should have called them the Fighting Amalekites. I thought that was just a cute name.
You'd lose every game, though, huh?
But yeah, the ancient Egyptians were actually probably a lot smarter than we think. And I used to try to get all of the students in my class to realize that people in the ancient times were not dumb. They just didn't have all the cool tech toys we have to keep information at hand.
Now, you were over in Egypt for how long?
2 months on a Fulbright thing. And before I went, I used to teach ancient Egyptian mythology and history, and we talked about some of the technological advances they came up with. And one of the things that we talk about is in a triangle, the opposite side of a right triangle of the right angle is called the hypotenuse. And that actually comes from a term that means rope stretcher. Because the ancient Egyptians did not have levels like we do with little bubbles in the water and everything. They had to figure out these things using what they had at hand. So they figured out to dig channels and stretch ropes. And they actually aligned the corners of the pyramids with north, south, east, and west. I mean, it's a pretty amazing technological feat considering what they were working with.
Yeah. And it's understandable that people say, well, it had to be aliens because we're not smart enough to do it now with the technology and the tools that we have. How could, again, it's with that worldview that everybody in ancient history were a bunch of country
Dummies.
bumpkins, and they couldn't even spell, let alone it was far from the truth. In fact, you run into that same situation over in Israel and Jerusalem when you look at the Temple Mount. They have stones that are the size of a bus and weigh however many tons, and they have no idea how the stones got there because there's not like a quarry just 100 yards away. So they had to be shipped in and brought inland all the way to Jerusalem. Yeah. So how did Herod the Great, how did he get this going? And they don't know, and they have like computer animated, maybe it was oxen and pulley system that they were able to get it there. But again, we're just scratching our head. So that's recent history. Was that aliens? Because if you want to go with that answer to aliens, then you've got a lot of stuff that's been built throughout human history, which is a marvel, a wonder of the world.
Right.
And it's either they were smarter back then and able to do more without the trucks and the stuff we have today, or, again, maybe aliens.
Yeah, there's one particular stone underneath there that's like 45 feet long, 14 feet high, and about 11 feet wide. and you couldn't move it unless you had a special crane today. And we don't know how they did it, but they did it.
Okay.
And it's not at the bottom.
Good. Well, that's a good question. Again, those are tough things you scratch your head on, like how could they make that back then? But I think it does come down to worldview. Were they pretty brilliant people? And we've talked several times how you make a copy of a copy of a copy. You know, it's that second law of thermodynamics, that we're getting dumber, not smarter, that we're on the shoulders of giants, and we have the technology and the math and all those things that all these people have done forever. All right, let's jump into another one. We'll just do two on this one. Raymond says, so we wouldn't do, this is on our episode on not enough faith to be an atheist. So we wouldn't do good things without God making us do them. Most of all the evil things that are done in this world are done in the name of God or Allah or some other man-made deity.
Yeah. So how do we even know what good is? That's the problem. Without God, there is no good. It's just a matter of personal taste. It's like that quote that we used from the Jeane Kirkpatrick, that was the UN representative, who said, so those of you who are cultural relativists assume that, slavery is just another way to get a society's work done. Cannibalism is just a matter of taste, all those kind of things. There have to be set ways to differentiate good from bad, right from wrong. And if you start making it a human thing, then it becomes a matter of just personal taste and going through the cafeteria line and picking out what I like.
Yeah. It's all subjective, relative.
Yeah.
There's no way to know good from evil. Okay. Well, that's our first of what I think we're going to do every episode now, called Time to Stump Stu. So you did well, but we'll just keep throwing some curveballs at you in upcoming episodes.